My name's Lisa Harrison, and today I'm talking again with Bill Brockbrader, aka Bill Wood, and for the first time, Eva Moore. So welcome both of you.
Hello.
No, thank you.
Nice to see you again, Bill.
Nice to see you. It's been a while.
It has been. You've been busy.
Oh yes, busy is my middle name lately.
Now, I feel like I need to preface our whole talk today by getting something out straight up, which is intention is what's more important to me than anything. And I believe in your intention. I think that you honestly believe that you are doing the right thing and you believe in the information that you are sharing. That is not what I'm here to challenge. What I think we do need to do is challenge, dissect, pull apart the information itself to help everybody else try and come to grips with what you've done, which is flip Obama on his head, essentially.
Yeah.
And there are people out there who are convinced that this guy is nothing more than a shape-shifting reptile, part of the cabal, and you're not going to change their mind.
Yep.
There are people who have been on the fence about him for some time, and there are people who have been following, say, channeled information for a long time, who have been saying from the very beginning that he's some kind of light worker in the pit, and he's doing the work that's necessary, and everything in between. So,
yep.
And I know that I can't possibly think of all of the questions that those three camps are going to have.
Good luck.
Yeah, I couldn't. But I just have to go at this from what came to me through watching your what's about an hour and a half announcement.
Yeah.
And let's look at the presidency in general to start with. I think anybody who's done their research into the cabal and into the Illuminati, into the presidency, would have a pretty good argument that every president since Kennedy has been a puppet for that group. And for all intents and purposes, Obama hasn't looked any different, up until now perhaps. And you know yourself that they've had technology that has allowed them to look into the future and identify potential presidents and get hold of them at a very young age. So the bit that I found the hardest to come to grips with, everything else to me is feasible, but this was the bit that I had a real problem with, was that Obama was somehow just a guy who wanted to change the country and went into this role naively, and once he got there realised it wasn't going to be the way he thought it was. If he is a good guy in the pit of darkness trying to sort of weed it out, then the only way I could accept that is if he knew exactly what he was doing from the beginning and knew the job he had at hand. I can't get my head around the idea that he was naive. When you look at his history, the people who are, he's absolutely surrounded by the same people that were in both Bush administrations. I can't see him doing this naively. Is that really the impression that you were given, that he approached this whole thing somewhat naively?
I think he was a bit naive during his campaign. However, it seems pretty obvious that once he reached the presidential office, he became more than well informed and started to kind of twist things around with what he was going to do. Now, let me point out one thing about something that you said about having the ability to look forward in the future and see future presidencies. I do agree with that fact. However, I think everybody will admit that all the information out there, everybody corroborates that Looking Glass and all forward viewing technology was discontinued some time ago. So now the paradoxes and timelines are playing out without any ability to look forward and see what the possibilities are going to happen with any changes.
But didn't we have Hillary look at it, and she was able to see 2012?
Right, but we're all assuming that there aren't still, millions of timelines that exist, even though they're converging. Everybody wants it to be one thing or another thing, or, there's a personal preference in this whole forward viewing process or looking into the future process. And what people are missing is that the ability was purposely taken away. Or, let's say, better information is that everybody got afraid to keep looking into the future. And it all leads up to this, singular timeline, or, two timelines, as most people like to look at it. But of those two timelines, we're still converging. We're still shrinking down to just two. And the paradoxes and possibilities exist on multiple levels still. And I don't think people can really get their head wrapped around the fact that maybe, just maybe, since things have changed since the last time anybody looked forward, that, a lot of people are guessing and trying to manipulate things because they saw the inevitable conclusion, and instead of accepting the inevitable conclusion, they want to bury their heads in the sand and keep fighting for the possibility that they see as timeline 2. And yet all the conclusions that were drawn up until the point where they stopped using the technology drew down to what appeared to me as timeline 1. So this is just another attempt, and back when I spoke with you in February, it was the same story. But this is another way of, the people that are in the know, the people that have the information, to deceive themselves into believing that timeline 2 is still possible. And I admit, timeline 2, the possibility will exist right up until the very end. But
well, see, I think that's
comes down to that choice.
Right. I think that's where everyone's head is at, is that all of this talk of mass arrests and Obama, that it's a very black and white situation. It's either exactly what people are saying it is, it's the takedown of the cabal, or the whole thing is a propaganda campaign to fool people while the whole New World Order regime is brought in. There's no black and white, there's no grey, there's no middle ground. It's pretty much one or the other. And go ahead.
I would love to get your perspective and talk about the fact that right now all Bill's done is brought forward information as a messenger. And, I mean, there's been this program that's been replaying with the advisor, the scientific advisor to Obama. Mm-hmm. Like, I look at everything from a philosophical holographic principle. And the idea that problems are driven by solution, and the idea that there are multiple possibilities. And so if he's bringing forth information, an information set, inevitably we are all responsible for co-creating the outcome, right? And his intention, I think, we need to make this clear, because I think this is what a lot of people get hung up on too, is that his intention is not to tell people who to vote for. His intention is to give them information for them to discern with, in the hopes that when the arrests start to come forward, that if there is a bunch of rhetoric being pushed of fear, that people have a little bit more inside information, that there may be a bigger person.
Plan.
Yeah.
Well, when you look at this from the sort of a collective consciousness point of view, even if the information that Bill's been given is false, And even if the information that Drake's putting out is false, what it's done, which kind of confirms what you said about every time they try to do something negative, it flips back and creates a positive. What they've done is put the whole concept into the collective consciousness. And if we focus on that, we can, in fact, bring that about, even if the whole thing was rubbish to start with. So that does support...
Or you can look at it from a different perspective and see that the seeds of possibilities have been planted and are now sprouting. And it's always been that push in collective consciousness that changes things. How that change comes about, well, who's to say? It wasn't always supposed to be somebody bringing out information, whether good or bad. It has made changes. And I don't think anybody would deny that the collective consciousness is swinging slowly but surely into the hope category. Certainly it's a lot closer and more vivid than the last time we interviewed. And I really do see that people are seeing the hope. Now, I'll give you a different perspective on it. Back in February, when I was talking about what I was talking about, none of that information has changed. And it's all still relevant and true. Since then, another individual has come along and on a very parallel path, unbeknownst to me or Drake, has pointed another level of consciousness to the direction of possibilities.
Who are you speaking of?
Drake.
Oh, okay.
And so when Drake's information came out, the consciousness level went from, Bill's a disinfo agent to here's the possibilities once again, but nobody ever really put two and two together of, Drake and Bill seem to be saying the exact same things because those that didn't hear my message or hear what I was trying to say the first time heard it the second time with Drake and then elevated their consciousness. And now there's a palpable momentum that people are really beginning to gravitate towards, and it's really shifting. And now the pushback on that, as there has been a massive effort to corrupt that movement, and I think that right there is the biggest demonstration that collective consciousness is shifting, because the pushback wouldn't exist if nothing was happening. And every time there's been some momentum shift in the past, there's been a level of
Equal
pushback.
And opposite, yeah.
So now we're at another turning point in the two timelines where it's either going to go back to timeline 2 and stay there for another little bit, like it did when I was first putting out information, or we're going to overcome the hump and jump into timeline 1 and stay there. And, we only have somewhere in between, 15 and 35 days to find out what happens, because according to my information, it's got to happen, sometime between June 5th and June 10th. Otherwise, the window closes again.
For me personally, my view of Obama has been that he is just another puppet. And up until recently, there was no question for me, but there's been a question mark over his head for me for a couple of reasons. The first one was when he gave Interpol more power and scope within the United States. I thought, that can't be good for the bad guys. What's going on there? Second was the way they've been dealing with Iran. The pattern has been, since 2001 at least, we name a bad guy, we go in and destroy their country. And there's not much of a time lag. But this thing with Iran, there's lots of tension building. There's lots of movement towards, surrounding the country, but nothing definitive has happened as yet. And I thought, it's like he's lagging his feet there. If he was doing what he was being told to do, there would not be an Iran anymore.
Right.
Not as we know it. So that put a question mark over what was going on for me. And then most recently with what's that thing called?
The ICC?
Yeah, the ICC, bringing in the International Court. Again, that cannot be good for the bad guys. So
no, that's a pretty good indication that something's up.
Is there, for the cynics though, for all the people who are going to look at even just those three things and go, it may not mean that at all, is there a flip side to him bringing America back into the ICC? Not what we're saying, but is there a flip side?
I think that's the most interesting thing, is nobody's presented an argument that says that helps the darkness at all. Nobody's come up with anything that says, oh, I see how that enslaves, everybody in the world. Let me just say unequivocally, and Eva can attest to this, I was the first skeptic in this information. I was not happy. I have not been an Obama supporter forever. I was disappointed in the way healthcare turned out. I've been disappointed in the NDAA, and I was very vocal about it, if people that keep track of me remember. Mm-hmm. And I was...
That's what actually initiated you coming forward. When that went down, you were like, right. Okay, I have nothing to lose now, so let's go.
Yeah. And, since then, when he enacted the executive order to take over national resources, man, I was flaming about that, just vocal as all can be. So when this information came to me, I was like, okay, enough's enough. You're really trying to convince me that this is the way it is, and that's the way you're telling me. And a solid 36 hours of contemplation, going back to it.
Shut down. I didn't know what was going on with him. He was pacing, and he woke me up in the middle of the night, and he's like, okay, we need to talk. And I was like, thank gosh.
And it wasn't until it was all laid out, all of my questions were answered, and I could see a strongly suggestible, plausible chain of events was occurring that could be interpreted both ways. The first piece of information that I was given that helped kind of the convincing process is, isn't it interesting that everything since the election has painted Obama in the mainstream media and the alternative media, every effort has gone to painting him into the corner of the bad guy. And there has been very little talk the other way. None of these alternative theories that were suggested to me I ever really heard about, even though they strongly indicate that there's this possibility.
Are you saying, hang on, can I just clarify something? Are you saying that the reason even mainstream media has been on an anti-Obama campaign, is that because the cabal want him gone?
Well, as strongly discredited, so if he did choose to act in an upright and righteous way, that everybody would believe that he was trying to take over the world, quite frankly. So it's very easy to paint both possibilities if your mind can let go of that.
And consider the source, right? The sources that it's been coming from.
Now, there's some very specific examples that were given to me. The healthcare system, Obamacare. Now, most people don't pay attention to the fact that the mandatory individual mandate was installed by the Republican Party as an amendment to the original bill proposed by the presidency. And that system was dismantled and corrupted and changed multiple times. It went back from the Senate to the House, to the Senate to the House. And in the end, everything everybody hated about it, and the thing that the Supreme Court is talking about right now, wasn't Obama's original plan. That amendment for the individual mandate was installed by the Republicans in the Congress. And it was forced through as a sacrifice to get the bill passed. And I don't think that most people separate those two obvious points of Obamacare and who really created Obamacare. If everybody remembers correctly, Obamacare was originally going to be a single-payer system, very similar to the state of Massachusetts state healthcare system, which I want to also point out was created by Mitt Romney, our other presidential candidate right now. And that was the first thing that made me go, okay, so if I take a step back and look at things the way they could be and not the way that has been painted over and over and over again as the way things are, maybe.
Yeah.
NDAA certainly gives the president a massive amount of power to arrest and hold some people that would be very difficult under our judicial system to arrest and hold were it not for NDAA. But if we take a look at NDAA, the amendment that was put in that people have the most problem with was put in by the House of Representatives, which is Republican controlled. And I think everybody knows that NDAA stands for National Defense Authorization Act. That was the money that keeps the Defense Department going for another year. So if Obama vetoed the bill, he was essentially putting our military on furlough, and because nobody would get paid after that. Now, I was in the military during the Clinton years. I remember that happening. I remember what it was like. It was a nightmare. And so when you're given a choice between, putting soldiers and sailors on the front lines and not giving them a paycheck for who knows how long, or taking what you got and looking at NDAA and going, hey, this might work for me, it's possible that he saw the possibilities of moving forward.
The idea that you've been asked to come forward in order to sway public opinion for Obama for the election is a bit of a moot point, because you also said that it was at the G8 summit, which is going to be this month, that he's supposed to come out of the closet and reveal who he really is and what his real intentions are. So that's this month. The election's not till November, so that's a kind of a moot point.
That was one more thing that made me feel good about everything, is that the current political system as we know it is going bye-bye. The shift that's going to take place in who our elected representatives are and what their abilities are going to change dramatically. Basically, they have all the power right now. Think of the way some of the states operate with ballot initiatives, where, like in California, you can get enough people together to bring up a point on the ballot that says we should vote on this as a state. Well, we've never had national ballot initiatives. We've never had the ability of people to vote directly on issues, except for amendments to the Constitution. And even then, it wasn't a real vote. Now we're going to find out that the really important stuff goes to the people. And the representatives are in charge of kind of the day-to-day housekeeping. But the people can get together and say, no, this is too important. We need to vote on it as a nation. And it's out of their hands.
So what did your sources give you any indication as to how this may have a domino effect around the world? I mean, this cannot be isolated into the United States, and surely all the people that need to be rounded up are not in the United States. So how is this going to affect everybody outside the States?
Well, I think nobody would disagree with the fact that the United States has been kind of the safe haven for the people that would do the most damage to the world. And certainly the
country, I can assure you.
Yeah. The Federal Reserve has been at the core of the central banking system throughout the world. Anytime there was a country out there that had their own banking system, we went in and fixed it. There's been many, many examples. I think there's only 3 countries left that have their own banking system, and they're all enemies of the United States. And Iran is the latest example. Cuba, well, we cut them off a long time ago. Yemen, another good example. Before that was Libya, before that was Iraq, and before that was Afghanistan. So you can see that every time somebody has their separate banking system from the almighty dollar, what happens? Now, we've had lots of wonderful reasons that we go after people and different countries, but it all comes down to each and every country that we've invaded in the past 2 decades has had the same similarity. They had their own money.
I don't think there'd be too many people to argue that going against the cabal is bad for your health, whether it's as an individual or as a nation. And this is why another big question about Obama. I mean, he must be feeling safe. For whatever reason, he feels safe enough to do what he's doing. And I know that you said that the recent so-called sex scandal in Colombia was actually an operation to round up the Secret Service agents that are around him that could do him harm, who were there to
and the military officials. There was military officials involved in that, sex scandal as well, and that kind of all those details kind of got swept away when you put the word sex next to the problem. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say it's not this way in Australia because I've been to Perth and I know, but if you say sex next to anybody in America in the news, it washes away any kind of need for evidence. Mm. I will give one very historical example. President Clinton was being investigated for shady financial dealings in this real estate project that him and Hillary were involved in. It was determined that there was no nefarious behavior in that, and all of a sudden the scope of the investigation was opened up to, this Monica Lewinsky thing.
And a little bit.
And after that, the man was being impeached, not for his shady financial dealings, which proved invalid, but, quite frankly, getting a BJ in the Oval Office.
Well, I'm sure he's the only one who's ever done that.
I'm sure.
Well,
I'm absolutely sure.
That's the thing that's really important. It goes back to the first interview I did with you. If people search up Kay Griggs, she talks about how her husband was involved in dirty tricks, and he would come home and, express how sexual coercion was used against military personnel and encouraged in these young men coming in right off the get-go. And the ones that would participate in, alternative or, extreme sexual experiences were the ones that would advance because they had something to hold against them if they ever decided later on to, come out with this key information. Look at Arizona Wilder's book where she talks about Bob Hope and Kissinger and how, they used her to actually, Kissinger put in like an altar in her that would actually act against Bob Hope to bring information back to Kissinger. They would set up parties where they'd invite people with the same sexual preferences and get them to do things, and then, they had them, right? And now they can move forward politically. You see Bob Hope and Marilyn Monroe, and they go to all these bases all over the world, right? Who's the other girl? Kathy O'Brien. She talks about very specifically Cheney and Bush, Jr., Sr. She talks about Jr. being, programmed and tortured, and that she has compassion for Bush Jr. because he was not really treated very well. And so there's all this stuff that goes on that the public doesn't get to see. And, all Bill was trying to do is say, there might actually be some hope. Yeah. What do you know? And people are just like, I'm not voting for him. And it's like, no, that's not what this is about.
Trust me, that was one of the real positives in all this was, basically the information I was given is that, he's okay with throwing in the towel in 2012 and letting the new system take effect because of what's happened to him.
But we've got a time frame here, haven't we? I mean, things are going to be apparent one way or the other between now and the middle of June.
Oh yeah, this is the window. Mm-hmm. If the window closes and nothing happens, then success on the people who we don't want to succeed.
Because the biggest concern people have is that they're being lulled into a false sense of security so that when they see military and the police forces walking down the streets, they won't fight back. And my argument there was you're not going to be finding military and police force in suburban streets walking amongst three-bedroom modest houses looking for these people. If you see them there, to me that's a problem. That's not where you're going to find them.
And I don't mean to contradict you, but the military is going to be key in the changes that are coming into effect. Because I think it's easy to present that.
Look at Rodney King. So when there was an exposure of an injustice, people felt validated enough to react in a way that was destructive. And so I think what Bill's saying, if they are in presence, perhaps, go ahead.
Well, more to the point, the individuals that wanted to take advantage of that situation
and encourage it
came out in much, much greater force than the people that were upset by that situation.
So they dressed up.
So
they did that in Toronto. They rioted during the G20.
Yeah.
And it was actually undercover people who were dressed as, like hooligans, right?
I've seen the evidence where they put so-called protesters in the van and then drive them around the corner, and someone's videoed the whole thing and they let them out. Or you've got protesters and the police supposedly having a scuffle, and they're all wearing the same police issue boots. You get that. That's happening with all the Occupy movements. It's we get that. Yeah,
that's the latest example is that all of these groups have been infiltrated, and anytime there's violence and disruption, it doesn't get pointed out that these people that caused the violence and caused the disruption never had anything to do with the movement up until the point where the violence started.
Infiltration brings up a point, though, because I think this is the hardest part that people have, at least those ones who are talking to me, with the Drake information. Mm-hmm. It's because Drake said that in the 70s he was actually shown a document, it was this big, that outlined the whole program, the whole plan for taking down the cabal. Mm-hmm. Knowing how infiltrated every aspect of government, military, secret service and whatever is, How could something like that have been kept secret for 4 decades? And then why expose it now, right when you're on the verge of actually implementing it? That's the good question people have.
Right, and it's a twofold answer. Okay, how do you keep something secret that's seemingly unbelievable?
In an environment that is so infiltrated.
Right. In America, all you have to do is tell people that it's too good to be true or too unbelievable to be true, and woo, we're right back into our, information comas.
Yeah. So you hide it in the truth?
Everything in America that's seen as unbelievable is instantly discounted. I will give 2 key examples. One we know, actually I can give 2 key examples of what we know for sure. The reason we started in the Vietnam War was the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The news popped up and said that an American ship was torpedoed by the Vietnamese. Wham! We're in a war. Not because it actually happened.
And that sailors died, right?
But it was presented in such a way that everybody instantly believed it. The point was justified, so we went in. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until just recently, and the Pentagon, not just recently, but the Pentagon Papers and Ellsberg revealed that it was all a scam. Mm-hmm. That there was no torpedoing. It was all fed to the media, and the media just ran with it. And Daniel Ellsberg was the one that brought out the Pentagon Papers saying that, they literally made up the reason we went to that war completely. Now we have another example of going to war under false circumstances. Iraq, weapons of mass destruction. I mean, we went so far as to, make a blockbuster movie about it with Matt Damon in Green Zone.
Yeah.
To demonstrate how completely diluted the media was by the military and State Department information. Mm-hmm. And how it was completely manipulated as top secret information being leaked to the public.
Well, and you see that in Julian Assange's first interview. I think it was his first one where he's talking to people who are saying, we want to talk to America. We want to negotiate. America doesn't want to. And that was what the Green Zone was about.
Yeah, and you brought up a point about Iran was that first interview completely invalidated the argument behind invading Iran. And more importantly, more information began to come out about Iran's level of seemingly, beyond worldly technology that they're wanting to release. And I talked about that again in my third interview with Kerry Cassidy.
And she quelled it. She said,
she smashed it. Him.
Oh, no.
But this is Keshi, yeah? And he's the one who's just...
And I very much brought up Dr. Kesh's website.
And she's like, yeah, I didn't talk to him. He's none of that.
And several months later, the information that I was given
about Iran
seems to be backing itself up. And ironically enough, it was Project Camelot that brought the information out and backed it up. Mm-hmm. Now, I've had some problems with information that I was given in the past, but when it works out like that, you really have to, give a nod to your source and say, okay, you guys, that was cool.
So I know that he recently presented all of the foundation's technology. He did demonstrations to, I think it was all member countries of the UN were invited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the G20s.
What's happened as a result of that in the US? Because, you're not hearing about it apart from a couple of outlets in the alternative media.
But here's what you don't hear about anymore in the US. Let's bomb Iran. Now, the information has gotten out, so if we did bomb Iran, this story would go out like gangbusters, and everybody would instantly question the real reasons behind it because it seemingly validates everything that's been said. And
so
I'm
this
just going to say...
information, let's just, for anybody who doesn't know, Keshe Foundation, the technology, when he's talking about free energy, he's talking about space travel, he's talking about teleportation, it's there, it's the done deal, isn't it?
Magnetic resonance theory, arc reactors, information systems that are seemingly, well beyond our current technology capacity. He's got the gambit.
And honestly, the world should have just been flipped on its head. But it hasn't been.
Should.
Yeah.
But because Fox News and MSNBC and CNN aren't putting out this information, they just politely don't acknowledge it. The vast majority of Americans are blinded by their television sets. And that's where they get their information from. And I'm sorry to say, but I think Americans are still the highest percentage of worst offenders when it comes to...
I won't believe it till it's on TV.
Right, lapping up everything that they're told in the mass media. I know from my experience in other countries that people are much, much more aware of the fact that American news programming is mostly white noise garbage that keeps us from finding out any actual information. I mean, the Today Show is mostly made up of, what star is doing this and what Hollywood actor, got arrested that day, but nothing really real.
There's something, if you've been to this country, you may have had a glimpse of it, but there's something about the Australian psyche which is very different. And a friend of mine just put it to me that we have a clarity of objectivity.
Yes.
We have really strong bullshit meters.
I agree.
And I'm sure it's to do with our geography. We almost feel like we're on the outside of the planet looking in.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything is just so far away. And we're so influenced not just by American culture, but by English culture, by European culture. We get it all, and Asia for that matter. So even though our kids start off with an American accent, that's the Aussie one kicks in after a while.
I mean, the only place I've seen more Australians than Australia was in Thailand. So
yeah, we've all been there. So we have a tendency not to get as invested in the information, and we can be objective about it, I think. But I can also understand why Americans are more invested, because you guys really are on the front line of this. We're not feeling it. It's all happening over there. So, but we still got too much of the population who if it isn't on the 6 o'clock news, that it isn't happening and it isn't real. I mean, we get that. We've got that. So I completely understand.
Inspirational as well. One thing I don't know if you're interested in going into or not, but one thing I would like to bring up is in regards to Drake and Diatra, we are behind them 100%. And
can you speak up a bit?
Oh, sorry. I'm just saying Bill and I are behind Diatra and Drake 100%, and we understand that they have a lot on their plate, and they kind of have come out of the chute just recently, and they're getting bombarded now with stuff, and you can see that in evidence of reaction to Drake towards Kerry, and then all of a sudden today there's an apology issued on the Facebook group saying that perhaps he jumped the gun. We're kind of having some issues there with them, and you know what, it's okay. They can bet us out for as long as they want. Our intentions are pure, and like we said, it's just information we're bringing forward. We'd hope people wouldn't succumb to divide and conquer mentality or shoot the messenger mentality. And we completely understand why people would have an adverse reaction to this information. We took that into consideration ahead of time. but Bill felt his source was reliable enough that it was worth the risk. And I believe that, Drake may have been too busy to understand Bill's full history, and perhaps somebody may have presented some information that Don Shibley has, attacked Bill with in the past. And it's, things that Bill has tried to address openly. And people, if they are diligent and go through the many interviews, he has addressed all of these issues openly. So I feel it's kind of Drake and Dieter are kind of in a, coming out of the gates, and it's like bam, 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 all this stuff's coming at them, and they're trying to stay focused. Mm-hmm. And that's, that's the priority. And so we're okay, and we support them, and just do what you got to do, and we'll be okay.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, when Drake came out on the scene, were you able to, through your own sources, confirm for yourself who he is?
Yes.
Yeah, we know who vetted him.
I am very, very good friends with the person that, if everybody remembers in the David Wilcock interview, he said that his source vetted Drake out and basically said that, he was the real deal. And ironically enough, a lot of the information that I was going to attempt to release initially in the third interview with Kerry Cassidy got quashed and pushed under the rug because I spent the entire time answering questions that were insignificant compared to what I was trying to really get out and talk about. And when I finally got to your interview, I was basically told,
damage control.
Do the damage control, plan B will go into effect. Yeah. Well, when Drake comes out with all the information that I was going to talk about, I'm like, he's got to be the real deal, because he knows exactly what I was being told 3 months ago.
Right. Okay. I got one more question for you before we finish this, and I know it's going to be the toughest one. But I'm only going to ask you because I'm sure you must have asked yourself this.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's a do or die kind of question, so I don't know. Let's look at the fact that we know that the Cabal have the ability to plot and plan and scheme years, decades, possibly even centuries in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, your source came to you about a year ago, yeah?
I engaged my source back in 2008. There's been a crescendo of my involvement directly in the movement, I guess is the easiest way to say. But about a year ago is when I started directly participating and not just waiting for... Go ahead.
From my reflection and listening and asking questions, I think because of Bill's, at 30 is usually when, so Bill has an implant, at 30 is usually when everything starts to recover, the hormones in the brain start to change and memories start to flood in. Bill's 39, so he's, over the last 10 years started to piece things together. And that's not an easy process for anyone out there that is going through that. Will attest
I've heard 27 is the magic age for this to start breaking down. The programming.
Yeah, the hormone shift. Yeah. So he's just let me finish this. He's been struggling with friends, family, thinking it's crazy. How do I do this? What does this all mean? How did this happen? Is it real? And that's a journey that he's taking time, right, to go through. And I would say it was a year ago that you kind of hit a wall where you were like, okay, I'm done running.
Yeah.
And I'm
done playing it safe. How about that?
I'm running from the truth because it was so overwhelming, I think, from what I've gathered. And his, when he's calm, I can ask him questions. And kind of poke and prod him a little bit more and figure out where the like piece it together. And my understanding is that he made a lifestyle change. He uprooted himself from any influences that were distractions and really submerged himself into getting ready for this.
Right. To go back to your 27 age, ironically enough, I was age 27 where I said, I'm not doing the bombings anymore, and then lo and behold, all of my legal problems came up. Mm-hmm. I think it's worth mentioning that Michael Jacko, who was a Navy SEAL that came out and said that, you know, he might possibly remember me, also said without any coercion that most of the Special Forces members are influenced in a very similar way.
It's like the mission is all that matters. Like, they can have good intentions, but the switch gets flipped, and it's like time for the mission, and that's all they see.
Right.
And it's like it could be completely polar opposite to what their day-to-day intentions are, but as soon as something happens and that switch flips, it's like they're gone.
Yeah.
In the opposite direction.
From what I understood, you said the source that gave you this information about Obama is the same source that came to you around a year ago. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm paraphrasing, but basically said to you, okay, you joined the military thinking you were going to be part of the solution, found out you were part of the problem. You now have an opportunity to be part of the solution if you want that, and you will have my support and protection as well as the people who I'm connected to. Does that pretty much sum it up?
Exactly. And, you know, just over a year ago is when that happened, and immediately after that is when all of my, you know, real problems started, and the consequences really manifested themselves. And I guess that's the one thing that validates the information that I'm getting, is that this blowback, seemingly unreal, kind of, we need to shut this guy up kind of blowback, and something that has manifested itself more so after I did my video than anything. With this latest video about Obama, has been the one thing that validates it to me that I must be saying something that really bothers people.
It's like,
well, here's my question, and I'm really hoping that you've asked yourself this already. Like I said before, knowing how they know how to plan ahead, have you asked yourself whether or not you were being set up a year ago to do this very thing, to come out now after gaining people's trust, after getting people on board, to then completely pull the wool over their eyes? And I said at the very, very beginning, I'm not challenging your intent. Mm-hmm. But have you been able to verify for yourself that that's not the case?
And yes, and I can state unequivocally that everybody would understand this explanation. Number one, and this is lesser so than the main reason, but some of the things that I was told to put out back in late January, early February have manifested themselves as 100% legitimate. And through sources, Kesh, Dr. M.T. Kesh, coming out with his technology and releasing it to the world. That's something that I talked about in my third interview with Kerry. Ironically enough, the same person that quashed that information initially, 3 months later, puts Dr. Kesh on video backing up everything, and then maybe a week later, he confirms that he has released his technology to all the countries of the G20. Mm-hmm. And that this is public information, and anytime anybody wants to use this technology, they have it. But more so, and this comes full circle back to the beginning of the interview, I cannot BS people on the momentum shift that everybody is sensing right now. there has been a very palpable shift in worldwide consciousness. And there is much, much more awareness of the possibilities of the future and what our positive intentions have as an influence on the world. And so much so that, more than 100,000 people on May 5th joined and participated in an event of co-creating. And it was widely publicized and had nothing to do with me initially. I just supported it when I found out about it. But the word is spreading, and it's getting out. And the message that I was able to talk to you in our initial interview of things changing and this positive timeline continuing to manifest itself, it's happening. And very few people that are invested in the level of co-creating and co-consciousness that is out there right now would deny that it's getting more and more easy to see that our consciousness collectively is shifting. And it's shifting in such a way that it's actually holding off some very negative things.
Such as, and this is what I asked him, because when he told me about Obama, and I don't have a lot of information about his source, so I'm like anyone else out there who's like, okay, come on, give, come on, more. I want to know where you have the nerve to trust this, because this is big, and it could make or break you in so many people's eyes, and people trust you, and like I, was on him, and
yes, she was.
and he said, okay, well, look, what's the big things that are happening? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, have we bombed Iran? No. Has China invaded? No.
Mega tsunami? No. Mega earthquake? No. Nuclear disaster? No. Financial crisis? No. Check. Even down to the USS Enterprise being torpedoed.
I was like, okay, so maybe there is something more out there going on than any one person can, in a third dimension way, put their finger on it. And if there are problems that are coming up, well, good. We're not afraid of problems coming up, because that means the solution is right behind that problem, pushing it to the forefront to find the solution and manifest it and anchor it in this third dimension. So let's go. Let's do it. We're not afraid.
And I could give, example after example after example in tiny ways that on a daily and weekly basis go, you're doing good. My involvement with David Corso, Randy Moggins, and all the people with Wolf Spirit Radio, who thought I was completely full of nonsense when I initially started talking, now are, going, hey, this information seems to be, manifesting itself here and here and here and here and here. And you've never talked to these people. But when people hear these seeds of information, something grows inside.
Well, and one thing might correlate to this consciousness shift that he's talking about. Who is the person that it was Moore's Law, and they said between 2013 and 2016, Moore's Law would finally break down, which is?
Moore's Law is a principle that was invented that said every 2 years, the number of transistors that they could squeeze into a 1-inch square CPU would roughly double. And that has been as linear as it could be since 1980.
And they mapped it on a cognitive basis. Like, this is the graph, this is what we say is capable. And it's our... And
not only is it broken, but we've been become involved in the project that's shattering it, and it's called multi-dimensional memory systems.
MIMS, and it's through holodynamics. If anyone's interested, they can email Vernon Wolf if they want more information. He's holodynamics.biz or holodynamics.com. And this man is a genius. He's the one that, gave me that whole foundational premise that every problem is driven by a solution, and that the implicate order, there's order and chaos, there's chaos and order. It's, a multidimensional.
The solution wants to be found. The solution wants to be implemented, so somehow a problem is manifested in order to find it.
Well, it can't create a problem cannot be created and manifest without the solution already be present. Whether or not we as a collective have the presence to shift our focus and go, okay, where are you? Where are you, solution? Because it has to be present. One and the other are coexistent. There's no way a problem that's really, really big can manifest without the solution that's equal and opposite being present as well.
And another really good example that's very tangible is 9/11. In 2002, right after the incident, I would say the vast majority of people, if you were a 9/11 truther, you were crazy. Mm-hmm. You were tinfoil hat wearing crazy. Now, in 2012, there is more consciousness and more information about how impossible this chain of events that occurred is, and it's stretched out into mainstream media, where most Hollywood actors, most information news sources will not stand up and say the truth about 9/11 has been told. Most of them will stand up now, and I mean this is including Fox News, will say there's questions that need to be answered. Even Geraldo Rivera said, if there's 1,300 engineers, physicists, and demolitions experts that stand up and say, these 3 buildings falling down is impossible, then maybe there's something to that. And
so
again,
where it went from being suspicious of the official story, you're a fruitcake. Now, if you believe the official story, you're a fruitcake. I mean, you're a naive sheeple, as people like to label.
Right, and the fact that the label of people being called sheeple has come out in the last 2 years is another manifestation of a reality that we are aware that we're being flocked and herded, and the information can't be real because these things continue to manifest that prove the original information bogus.
Right now, I think what is most important is Bill's put this information out there. Do with it as you will. Discern for yourself. What we want to do is encourage people to stay focused on the big problems. And what are the big problems out there? Well, Fukushima. The fact that we have technology that is not being implemented enough. There are arc reactor technology there that could, easily and readily be implemented with the right funding. Vernon Wolf, again from Holodynamics, has the technology. It's been peer reviewed. They're just waiting for the funding to come in to build this arc technology underground. It's a remediation park to basically recycle materials, including toxic waste, outside Cottonwood, Arizona. And, there are these things out there. That's a big problem. We need to focus on the solution. How do we get this going? How do we get the funds to these people like Kesh? How do we get these things implemented? That's the big problem. How do we take care of these people in Fukushima?
I think that's the big picture that everybody needs to see, is if we can get past these doubts and these indecisions, and when the world roars up at good information and says, don't believe, don't believe, don't believe, we remember our Wizard of Oz story and hear the words, don't pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, and realize that there are solutions that are just right there. I mean, that you could touch it if you reached out.
For me personally, I have a very positive view of where we're going. I can see where we're going. I know where we're going. Where I'm vague on details is what it looks like between here and there. And So I actually don't believe that, we're looking at a new world order, one world, not in the negative sense anyway, future.
Mm-hmm.
But when there's absolutely two sides to one world. There is the dark prison planet version that some people want to implement, but there's a very positive version as well, and it's one that I do think we do need to implement in order to move forward. We have to break down national boundaries. We have to become one planet. And a single currency could actually be a good thing for nations to trade. There are, and if every nation was, based on their resources, were allocated the same value,
right,
and you wouldn't have 3-cent an hour workers in some countries and $60 an hour workers in other countries.
Even the playing field.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I mean, there is to me you can call it, no, you wouldn't want to call it utopian, but certainly a positive version of us coming together as a planet.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that you're talking about need to actually happen in order to bring that to fruition.
Yep.
The things that you're talking about need to happen in order to bring either of those versions to fruition. So that's where we're treating a really, really fine line of discernment between, okay, is the collapse of the banking industry in order to bring in the one world currency in a negative sense, or a one world currency in a positive sense? And there's nothing yet to tell us, there's nothing definitive to say which version we're looking at yet.
Correct.
Right.
That's what's killing. That's what's driving everybody nuts.
Well, and here's what the thing is, and I think there's this hole, right, where we go, okay, without that, what options do we have? And, look at the microfinancing in India, the Grameen Bank, right? When people make people prospering the commodity, that you get benefit from helping others succeed and others become healthy, that should be what the basis, like a conscious capitalism happening, where the stock market shifts to measuring how much you are compassionate, how much you co-create with others, how much that your stock goes up as you are creating consciously in an economic sense.
And how much true value you're giving and contributing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what we're really missing is the fact that we need to be ready for certain changes. You could look at what I just put out as a huge piece of the puzzle and something that we need to wrap our arms around and get ready for, but it isn't being seen as that. It's being seen as an impossible barrier that couldn't possibly be.
Wouldn't it be
for
great
a huge
if it is,
group
though?
of people. But what we've seen is that those impossible barriers, just like back in late January, early February, when the love and lighters and, hope is enough was a bunch of hocus pocus. But now we're seeing that positive intentions, co-creation, all of that is much, much more real and much, much more evident in the world, and more changes have taken place. Good information, more and more good information is coming out, but we really need to understand that we don't know anything in comparison to what we do know. Einstein said it best, that in comparison to what we know nothing. And when we are presented with knowledge, it's very easy to sit there, dig your feet into the ground and say, no, the world is flat. It's been flat, it'll always be flat. How dare you? How dare you try to make it round? But that's something I've been saying for years, is that we are not a world is flat people anymore. We are moving to the world is round.
And it's evolving, and that's the thing. Information, as we collectively, like that Torah in Thrive, they did that demonstration of the Taurus. The information kind of comes through us, like goes back out, comes back into be potentialized yet again, and it's an ongoing balance. As long as we have human bodies and we're in third dimension, we are here to potentialize beliefs and consciousness, and that will never end until we leave this body, And so it won't stop. People, and people are like, when is all the truth ever going to be? It's like, well, it's ongoing. And just be okay with that, and be open and explore and understand that we are evolving, and as we evolve, the information evolves.
And I guess that's the best point that I could kind of close up everything with is I ask this question to everybody. Is it possible? Is it within the realms of possibility that this could be good information? That Obama will simply fulfill his oath of office and do what I could easily argue is the hardest thing anybody could possibly attempt in one lifetime, is to literally change the world and go up against the biggest enemy that's ever existed in history and beat it.
Well, and transform it, right? And then at the very least, he's been present, potentially he's been present to just hold the space for possibility, for transformation.
And
we have to go through this transitional period. We can't go from the current paradigm to a new paradigm without breaking some eggs, so to speak. We have to go through this transition.
And if everybody can kind of hold space of the possibility in their minds, that will grow into something very real, very tangible, and as soon as we hit that critical mass, there's a real opportunity that is manifesting itself right now. And if we can all get together and co-consciously push it forward, what's the harm?
Well, I guess the whole world will be watching with bated breath the G8.
Right. I think so. I'm going to be.
Yeah, me too. That'll make it or break it for many people.
But the reality is that the financial markets are in turmoil. It may not be publicly displayed that way in the general media, but we can't keep building and building this Ponzi scheme that we all are very aware exists, because we can't keep borrowing more and more money and paying more and more interest. Eventually we hit the limits of human capacity. And that's where we're at. And I would suggest to people that something is going to happen before the financial meltdown and chaos, as opposed to the financial meltdown, chaos, and then something happening.
I propose that we get new stock market that identifies the biggest issues in the environment, environmental cleanup. And the companies go to work to create the best
ideas,
or actually go to work to put their efforts towards cleaning up Fukushima, towards, poverty, people starving. They're actually, like Danone partnered up with, I think it was the Grameen Bank, and they opened up these little trolley carts, like hot dog stands, where they fortified the yogurt so that the people in the communities actually were getting the nutrients that they needed. But what they would do is turn these little carts over, once the initial loans were paid off, to these people scot-free. And they now have a business that actually enriches the community's nutrition and creates prosperity in the environment of the community. And so those types of businesses need to be created and going to work to help this planet. And that should be the basis of the stock market. It should be about contribution to the ecological consciousness of this whole planet and fast. That's what I propose.
Right, because right now, monetary system is based on a belief.
An agreement.
There's no value behind the paper that we carry around in our pockets
Unless
if
we
somebody else believes that it does have value. But it really, we know that it's based on nothing, that it's only paper that somebody else printed for free.
It came out of a
And
Monopoly box.
Right. And so somebody is creating it out of nothing. Why can't we do that without the Federal Reserve or the IMF or
People just have such a hard time getting their head around the idea that they could go walk into a store with anything other than that piece of paper.
Exactly. And that's what we're really missing is we all still believe in money, but I can very much prove money is an illusion.
Not me.
So we can really get past that money issue. Watch what happens when all we care about is prosperity. And we don't care about anything except putting our fullest energy and resources and the value that's placed on our birth certificates into actual energy, actual time, actual work, effort that we have in a lifetime into pushing forward the best ideas and pushing forward each other as a race. And I've always said this, right now we're in a society where climbing the ladder means everybody tries to tear you off the ladder, and that's how you stay ahead. Imagine if we all lifted each other up, how fast everybody would get up the ladder. And we miss that. We're still a little bit too confrontational, a little bit too competitive.
Well,
we're told that that's part of human nature. It's human nature to be competitive. It's human nature to want to be on top. It's human nature to blah, blah, blah. And it's not. When you see that in times of stress and trouble and disaster and whatever, what is human nature is to reach out and help. That's what comes to the fore.
What comes to my mind, there was this exercise I did in a Stephen Covey workshop where everybody broke into groups, and it was like this sheet, and it was try to get the most money. If 2 people in your group vote X, Y, Y, then you get this much points. And it was like your group has to try and beat the other group points, right? But then what we understood in the end is if you try to vote your team, if you consciously try to figure out what your team's going to do to vote against them so that you get points, your team suffers. And so it was a really neat way to understand how when you don't work together, I have to find it and demonstrate it because I'm probably massacring it right now, but it was a really great way for people to understand that working together is actually the most beneficial to your personal goal.
We are actually completely codependent, and that's okay. We've been told it's not, and it's why we've become so isolated. Most people don't know their neighbours, they don't know the people in their community. They're not even on very good terms with the people in their own household sometimes.
Right.
And it actually, I think, is to break down that whole, the nature of how we communicate and our codependency, because when we do work together and we are codependent, we thrive. And that's it. That's all we do. We thrive.
Yes. And it's happened many times in the past few months where we've seen the potential manifest itself. And more so now than ever, we are doing something collectively, and the tangible results are beginning to slowly manifest themselves as well. And it's going to just continue to build and build and build. Certainly when we get some big evidence of co-creation, it's really going to kick off. And the suggestion is that, when we get to a point where we're able to co-create a bright enough future, that's exactly when the mass arrests happen, because we are now cognitively
Holding
aware
space.
of what needs to potentialize to make those mass arrests happen.
Mm-hmm.
If we can get behind the solution...
Every time you hit your leg, it bumps the timer.
Oh, okay. Every time we can get behind the solution, which I have proposed would be the least likely source of the solution, maybe, or, the least advertised source of the potential. Imagine what's going to happen when people see that manifestation occurs and that all of these possibilities begin to manifest. What will people get on board with next?
Yeah, you're touching on something that I don't know, I've been on a kick lately about, which is the collective imagination and how it is a technology. And I think it's probably the greatest technology ever.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
We've just forgotten how to use it. And
Purposefully to forget.
Yes, and manipulated to forget, absolutely, and manipulated to feed the collective imagination with negative images and emotion. Mm-hmm. But go and read the blog post I put on my website. It's called Come What May. You might get a kick out of it. But it's talking exactly about that, and that's what we're remembering. We're remembering the fact that we are individuals contributing to the collective imagination, and that the reason there is so little information about 2012 from any sources, whether it's Looking Glass or psychics or whatever, is because we haven't imagined it yet. We haven't used that technology to really, really envisage that time yet. And we're still so focused on this paradigm. And we're constantly, through that technology, recreating this paradigm, because that's where our energy is, that we're dragging the whole process out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We're flogging a dead horse.
Yeah.
Well, we got way off track.
No, that I think that is the most important piece of that ties back to the whole point, is all Bill is doing is putting out information for people to discern and co-create or not as they will. What if we all co-create the reality of a possibility that can manifest into a transitional future, rather than focusing on what we got, and I personally like an option than what's been perceived in the mainstream media. I like the option.
Right. And it's funny that the more and more I talk to people, more and more people are coming forward, going from, it's hopeless, I don't see any way we're going to get out of this, sad, pathetic world that we're in, to, you know what, I'm so done with hopelessness that I'm just going to try hope for a little while.
What are you going to lose?
Right, and that's exactly it. What do I got to lose to be positive for a little while?
Or just open.
Yeah.
Just stay present and watch potential unfold.
Well, I think it's just getting over a fear of being naive, or getting over the fear of being duped, getting over the fear of walking into a trap.
Totally understood.
And again, that's that old thinking that, that back in February when I was putting out information, that was the majority of the conversations that I was hearing. Oh, he's duping us. He's disinfo. He's lying. And then what manifests 3 months later? Another individual coming along saying almost the exact same things and building on that potential, where there is a huge number of people
leverage now
that didn't believe in the original message that are now coming around and saying, well, if two people are saying it, then maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, to close, I guess my official stance here is that my jury is out on Obama, and I'll be watching the G8 to see what happens there. That But I absolutely hold a vision of the future that I want, and I know who's in it, and I know who isn't, and I know who's in positions of leadership, if we even need them. I think we will actually get to the point where we supersede all of that. The current government structure will be obsolete. Once enough people start taking self-responsibility, and at the moment we're living in a world where we've given our responsibility for our health to doctors and pharmaceutical companies, responsibility for ours and our children's education to a government-controlled school system. And we just need to start taking back, and even in the simplest ways, like for your own health, start taking responsibility for that. Stop relying on pills and doctors and pharmaceuticals. Anyway, I could get on a rant, I really could, so I won't. But, the more we get people taking that self-responsibility, the more we don't need leadership, the more we don't need government structure the way it currently is, the more what you were talking about, people will go and vote on all the issues. Mm-hmm. And it might be that you end up spending a bit of time at the polls, but it'll be worth it, to restructure this whole thing.
Yeah. And what if our society was based around progress rather than being busy and accumulating wealth?
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Like, what if people were too busy focusing on what is progress and what does that look like and defining that to worry about service to self? They were too busy focused on service to others. Wow. What does that look like?
Yeah.
It looks very different to what we've got now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's where things are going, where things need to go. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think most people have a hard time with when it comes to talking about things like a resource-based economy or getting rid of the current financial system. And you can't do that without changing the education system. Mm-hmm. Because let's say you've had an academic, you spent years perhaps achieving academic status. You've got pieces of paper on top of your pieces of paper and letters behind you and in front of your name. That boils down to having absolutely nothing of value to offer your community. Mm-hmm. I might be able to do your taxes and, tell you which companies to invest in, and I can make a fortune in the current regime, but I've got absolutely nothing of value to offer a community where that financial structure is not there. So things like trades, things, real world knowledge and experience and practical skills is what becomes important.
Right, and the fundamentals have to be addressed. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, the fundamentals need to be addressed.
Yeah, and that's the thing that goes back to what you were saying about our collective imagination and the purposeful encouragement to forget how powerful that is. There's a whole language of understanding self that has been repressed. There's a whole scientific or imaginative or co-creative understanding that we have not been taught in our school system. We don't understand how we work.
No.
We don't understand what third dimension is. We don't understand this isn't on the agenda in school. We don't go to school and learn about hyperspace or plasma. We don't go to school and teach our children about co-creation and their powers of their imagination. We don't understand the intuitive language. We're not taught to understand it. We're not encouraged to understand it. That could be a revolutionary class. Understanding holographics and human potential.
No, those of us with kids in the school system are finding we have to spend more and more time counteracting what's going on at school. I'm lucky in that I've got kids who, on the one hand, they think mum's a fruitcake every now and then, but they will also, when they come to me with a question, I go, well, do you want my answer or do you want the official answer? And they'll go, oh, give me both, because I want to know what all my other kids, all my friends are being told, you know.
Yeah.
And I've taught them to question everything, you know, including me, which is challenging, but yeah.
No, and that's true. We have to understand that we have been lied to. The fundamentals of who we are and the potentials that we have in every moment to co-create has been suppressed, and there are fundamentals that need to be addressed, and that's another, like Fukushima and the fundamentals of being human. That's my agenda. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I back you up 100% on the school system, and, you know, what is important? How do we define that? And how do we show up?
And I think that there's a hell of a lot of people out there who have the right intentions and who have the good ideas and who have the ability. They just need the opportunity. And they'll get it soon. Yeah.
More and more people are getting it more and more every day. So, you know, from my perspective, what I've seen in the past 3 months has been an amazing shift. Maybe it's too small to see for the average person, but it's very tangible to me.
Well, I want to thank you both. We went off on a few different tangents there, but it was fun.
Yeah. It's important. I think sharing is important and underestimated.
Yep.
Yeah, and thank you for the time. It's been a wonderful,
very lovely
time spent, because you know, we're at another critical time, and lo and behold, there's Lisa.
Well, thank you again, and we'll talk again soon, because this has been fun.